Our enemies understand us. They speak our languages, they know our political culture. We need to understand the mind of our enemies. The Muslim Brotherhood is sort of the gateway drug to radical Islam and to violence. And the goal of the Muslim Brotherhood is to replace democratic societies and states with a caliphate and to rid the Middle East of Jewish people and of Israel to complete the work of Hitler. To influence universities, you're going to influence the next generation of citizens. And what the Muslim Brotherhood has been doing for about 40 years is fund American universities. It's changing the discourse in academia and training young people to perceive reality differently. This is so profoundly anti-American that we need to take a stand.
We are sitting here today with Charles Asher Small, director of a fellowship training program at the University of Cambridge, specializing in anti-Semitism. First, I want to go over what exactly is the Muslim Brotherhood and how are they influencing our society?
So the Muslim Brotherhood, I think, is a very important issue that most people in Israel, in Europe, North America don't really understand. The Muslim Brotherhood is a social movement that began in 1928 in Egypt. It takes a perversion of the great religion of Islam and fuses it with European anti-Semitism and even Nazism. It takes the protocols of the elders of Zion, the words and ideas that led to the extermination of the Jewish people during the Shoah, and fuses it with this perversion of Islam and even Nazism. And the goal of the Muslim Brotherhood is to replace democratic societies and states with a caliphate, with the narrow religious understanding of Islam, and to rid the Middle East of Jewish people and of Israel. The spiritual leader of the Muslim Brotherhood for many years, Yosef Qaradawi, always preached that the true believer, the true Muslim, is obligated to complete the work of Hitler. This is the raison d'etre of the Muslim Brotherhood. It's a core element of their ideology to destroy Israel and murder Jews around the world.
How are they doing so?
So, at a very basic level, we can see Hamas. Hamas is the Palestinian chapter of the Muslim Brotherhood. And we all know, especially after October the 7th, that Hamas is committed to destroying Israel and murdering Jewish people around the world. In the covenant of the constitution of Hamas, they copy and quote from the protocols of the elders of Zion. In their constitution, they call for the destruction of Israel and the murder of Jewish people. It's the core element of their ideology. And I think for your viewers and for people who are concerned about democracy and the future of the Jewish people and of Israel, we really need to understand the ideology of these social movements. It's very important. So Hamas is supported by both the Shiite and Sunni world. They're supported by the Iranian revolutionary regime, and they're also supported by Qatar. Qatar is a interesting state. It's a small country with less than 350,000 citizens. It has good relations with the United States. It has a very important military base, American military base in Qatar. It has good relations even with Israel until recently, and European countries and our democratic allies. The royal family of Qatar, in addition to being friendly with Western democratic countries in the United States, they're also friends with the Taliban. They have good relations with the Taliban, even Al-Qaeda, and with the Muslim Brotherhood and Hamas. They were funding Hamas and supporting Hamas. The leadership of Hamas, whatever's left of it, is still in Qatar. And the royal family of Qatar has a bayah. In Hebrew, bayah means a problem. In Islam, it's a spiritual oath. They have a spiritual oath to all the religious edicts, rulings, and fatwas of the Muslim Brotherhood. And since the Muslim Brotherhood is committed to destroying Israel and the Jewish people, it's also committed to destroying the United States of America. So this is a threat. So the Qataris are funding and using their soft power to promote the ideology and work of the Muslim Brotherhood around the world. And the funding of our universities, the funding of our cultural institutions, of Western media, is they're using soft power to influence the political culture and discourse in democratic countries, and they're having success.
What exactly is the fascination with taking down the state of Israel and destroying the Jewish people?
So the Muslim Brotherhood's fascination stems from its ideological roots, because they took the European anti-Semitism, the protocols of the elders of Zion, the words and ideas that literally led to the Holocaust. Professor Elie Wiesel always taught us that the Holocaust didn't begin with the train tracks and the crematoriums. It began with words and ideas. So they took the words and ideas that led to the Holocaust, and it's the core element of their ideology. It's part of the raison d'etre. And why Israel? I would say from a perverted Islamic perspective, a Muslim cannot be equal to anybody else. A Muslim has to be higher. So Israel is the only state in the region in which the Jewish people, have self-determination. There's no other country in the area where non-Muslims have self-determination. And from a Muslim Brotherhood perspective, it's not permissible for a Muslim to be equal to a Jew. A Muslim has to be higher than anybody else. So in Israel, being a democratic country, Jews, Muslims, and Christians are equal under the law. Men and women are equal under the law. Gays, people, and straight people are equal under the law. This is what the basic democratic principles are. This is the basic notion of being a citizen in a democratic country. The Brotherhood wants to replace democracy with a caliphate in which Muslims reign over other people, and the others would be dhimmi or protected minorities, but a Jew cannot be equal to a Muslim. So in other words, it's an ideological conflict. It's not a conflict over land or where the boundaries are. If the boundaries are 67 or 48 or whatever it is, it's really just the self-determination of the Jewish people, which is not tolerable from an Islamist Muslim Brotherhood perspective.
You were mentioning earlier the idea of soft power, and we know that in the project they were mentioning that a way to infiltrate the West is through methods of soft power. What are different methods that they've used, and how much have they invested into this?
So it's a good question. So we know, from history, different revolutionary movements have targeted universities, have targeted students, because you can make the argument that universities are the most important institution in our democratic society. It's the institution that teaches young people how to be citizens. It teaches their values, their beliefs, their worldview. So you influence universities, you're going to influence the next generation of citizens. And what the Muslim Brotherhood has been doing for decades, for about 40 years, first mainly through the Saudis, and then after 9/11 with the Qataris, is fund American universities and Western universities, the same in England and France, in Canada. It's funding universities and changing the discourse in academia and training young people to perceive reality differently. And I think the results of 40 years of funding from radical political Islamist organizations and the Muslim Brotherhood has led to the fact on October the 8th, young Europeans and North Americans came out to support Hamas. And Hamas, being part of the Muslim Brotherhood, is not only anti-Semitic and anti-Israel, it's sexist, it's homophobic, it's anti-democratic. So for young people to come out in their kafiras and support Hamas is really not only dangerous in the immediate sense, but it shows how soft power has changed the intellectual discourse at our best universities. Students at our best universities are paying in the United States up to $90,000 a year, are coming out in this sort of Red-Green Alliance and supporting anti-American and anti-Semitic, sexist, and homophobic ideologies in the name of being progressive and cool. And this is really alarming. This is really, it's a reactionary social movement that somehow these ignorant people perceive as being progressive and cool.
So building off of that point, how have they been able to convince a pretty progressive audience, such as Gen X, that supporting groups such as Hamas, such as the Houthis, is a progressive movement?
It's the miseducation of two generations. In 1983, Edward Said, this famous Palestinian intellectual, who was a professor at Columbia University, he said in 1983 that he was the last Jewish intellectual. And what he meant was that he was the inheritor to the Frankfurt School of Thought. It was a very important philosophical movement that was created by important thinkers and philosophers who were mainly Jewish refugees from the Holocaust, from Germany. They moved to the United States. And that he argued he was the last Jewish intellectual and inherited the Frankfurt School. And he said that American Jewish professors became fat scribes in the suburbs, and he was the last Jewish intellectual, and that the Palestinians were the Jews, and the Israelis and the Jews were the Nazis. And when he said this in 1983, people thought he was disconnected from reality or he had a bad day. But fast forward 40-odd years later, 42 years later, and this is the zeitgeist. This is the discourse at our best universities. So by investing billions and billions of dollars over 4 decades, this has become the discourse. It started in Middle East studies. It spread through the social sciences and humanities. And this is where we are today. And it's extraordinary. In a sense, and I think this is very important for your listeners, I would argue that ideas are really important. Ideas matter because they filter down into society. So if we look back to the Holocaust and what led to the Holocaust, it was scholars and intellectuals, it was theologians and philosophers and professors of biology and eugenics that created this notion that all of humanity was divided into different racial groups and that humanity was racialized in this intellectual paradigm. And white people were constructed as being superior, and black people were at the bottom of the spectrum, and they were inferior. And this led to all sorts of colonial projects and expeditions that went on for centuries. And in this racialized paradigm, the Jew was perceived as not white and poisoning the purity of the white Aryan nation and race. And this racist anti-Semitism that comes out of the universities, the best universities of Europe, led to the systematic extermination of the Jewish people. In less than 2 generations, the intellectuals of today, I call them intellectual clowns, are now saying Jews are white. And it's not that we're white, welcome to the club, and we're so terribly sorry for what happened to you. Now, in less than 2 generations, we've gone from being not white and worthy of extermination to now becoming white, and in less than 2 generations, becoming the embodiment of whiteness, of white supremacy, of racism, of apartheid, of colonialism and occupation. And this racialization of the Jewish people in the contemporary intellectual paradigms and discourse leads to the justification and the perception of the Jew as the colonizer, as a foreign element in our ancestral homeland where we are clearly indigenous to our land. And this discourse coming out of the best universities are now justifying the attack on who we are as a people. So we're not being attacked for being inferior or poisoning the purity of the white race, but now we've become constructed as being white and worthy of being, removed from our homeland. It's extraordinary, but it's really taking root at our best universities and has become normalized from our universities into our media of record and now into political discourse. And it's very dangerous.
We've seen this extreme paradigm shift where I would say the catalyst was October 7th, but not in the way that we would like the catalyst to have been October 7th for people to sympathize with Jewish people. It actually created the complete polar opposite effect. So how do we see that the Muslim Brotherhood had an impact in this sort of paradigm shift?
So I think the Muslim Brotherhood had an impact in the sense that I'd say universities, institutions of higher education, has a profound moral responsibility because they're providing an education for our next generation of citizens. And if these liberal institutions are taking money, billions and billions and billions of dollars from entities and states and foundations that are being controlled by an ideology that wants to destroy democracy, that wants to destroy liberal education, that wants to murder Jews and subjugate women, it's no wonder that our graduates, they are espousing these ideas. And I think it's morally reprehensible that universities are taking and are being permitted to take money from these entities. And it's extraordinary. So think about it. In Afghanistan, as we speak, another ally of the Qatari regime, it's illegal for women to go to school. 8 or 9 months ago, they passed a law where it's illegal for a woman's voice to be heard in public, right? This is the ideology that is funding Cornell University, that we found $10 billion at Cornell coming from Qatar, $1.1 billion at Georgetown, $1.3 billion at Texas A&M. American universities, 6 American universities have campuses in Qatar in which this ideology of subjugating women, of advocating the removal of gay people and Jewish people from society and killing them is the ideology of the day. It's extraordinary. And then these institutions purport to be liberal and politically correct and permits this normalization of anti-Semitism in these institutions, in the classroom and in the campus. It's extraordinarily criminal and irresponsible, I would say. Yeah.
What I'm trying to understand, though, is how exactly was the Muslim Brotherhood able to connect progressive movements and progressive institutions such as Ivy League universities with the Taliban and with Al-Qaeda? These two things
Yeah.
are not aligned in any sort of way. How were they able to do that?
So, we call this the Red-Green Alliance. So, at a philosophical level, what they have in common is interesting. So, in the sort of progressive post-colonial discourse, Western intellectuals want peoples and spaces, countries, nations that were once colonized to become free from Western hegemony and power. At an intellectual and political level, this is sort of an important discourse taking place in the West. So they want the West to be removed from these once colonized spaces. Radical political Islam wants to rid the Islamic world and other parts of the third world from Western hegemony and remove Western created states and replace it with a caliphate. So, in a strange way, they both share this political and ideological notion to weaken the West and remove it from places that were once colonized. So, this is sort of the Red Green Alliance. And it gets to the point where people in the West don't pay attention to the ideology and how some of these social movements that want to push the West, Jews and Christians, out of these once colonized spaces are reactionary. And you get instances where people like Edward Said or Judith Butler, who's an American Jewish queer intellectual, argues to this day that Hezbollah and Hamas need to be perceived as part of the progressive global left. So it's extraordinary. And this type of discourse is really rooted at high levels of intellectual and philosophical discourse at the best universities in the West. So there's this red-green alliance that is extraordinarily contradictory and hypocritical. And then, because of this, you also have people like Yosef Kaudawi, who was the spiritual head of the Muslim Brotherhood, who argued throughout his life that the true believer needs to complete the work of Hitler. This is the character in which the progressive elements of the British establishment, Ken Livingstone, Jeremy Corbyn, and other progressive people on the left, brought in Kaudawi into the British establishment, and Kaudawi helped to create and establish Islamic studies at Oxford University. So here you have sort of the entryism of Muslim Brotherhood, soft power in Western establishment at universities, in business. They were sort of welcomed in. And this is where the encroachment and the entryism began 40 years ago.
We know that the Muslim Brotherhood has been infiltrating our societies through different nonviolent means and through soft power. That makes it very difficult to designate them as a terrorist organization. But we have an example like the governor of Texas, who passed a resolution to ban the Muslim Brotherhood from acquiring land, if I believe that that's correct. Do you think that that's a good first step? Is that effective? Or what can we do in order to ban the Muslim Brotherhood?
So on the one hand, I think the Muslim Brotherhood is sort of the ideological foundation of radical political Islam. It's sort of the trunk of the tree in which other branches of Islamist ideology, from the Iranian revolutionary regime to Al-Qaeda to Daesh and other reactionary social movements, the Muslim Brotherhood is sort of the gateway drug to radical Islam and to violence. But they're more, I'd say politically, they're more passive. They don't all agree in violence or immediate violence. They all believe in the overthrow of Western democracies and to be replaced by a caliphate. They all believe in the destruction of Israel, the murder of Jews, and the destruction of Western countries. Some say through political means and entryism, some say through violence, but the ideological roots are the Muslim Brotherhood. So with your question regarding Texas, yeah, I think it's an amazing first step. It's an executive order by the governor that names the Muslim Brotherhood as a foreign terrorist organization, and very importantly names CARE, which is a very influential nonprofit organization in Washington, sort of doing the bidding of the Muslim Brotherhood. They have a lot of political influence, and they're all over the United States, and they provide entryism into civic society, into mosques, into universities and cultural institutions. So I think what the governor did is an amazing first step, and to some extent it's symbolic, but I really believe this will be a first step. And other American states and the federal government, I think, are going to start taking similar action, and I think it's really important. How deep this executive order goes is questionable, but I think it's an important first step, and I would argue that if CARE and other Islamic organizations start to sue or challenge this legislation by Texas, they're going to be subjected, if it goes to the court, to discovery. So all of their records will be open to the public. So I don't think they're going to challenge it so easily.
We've seen an incredible rise of anti-Semitism plague our country in the last few years. What do Americans need to understand about this rise of anti-Semitism in connection to American citizens? And how can we warn Americans?
Right. So I think what we're doing at ISGAP is really important because, in a sense, I find our community has been very reactive. And what we're trying to do, especially with the release of this report yesterday on entryism of the Muslim Brotherhood into American society and Western democracies, is understand one of the causes or one of the sources of this explosion of anti-Semitism. So even take, for example, the new mayor of New York, the mayor-elect of New York, Mr. Mamdani. Mr. Mamdani was an organizer of SJP at Bowdoin College in Maine. Students for Justice in Palestine, and ISGAP has written several reports on SJP. SJP comes out of AMP. AMP is the American Muslims for Palestine. This is a Muslim Brotherhood group. SJP comes out of the Muslim Brotherhood. Most Americans, and even American Jews and Jewish organizations, don't understand the importance of this connection. So you have situations where Hillels and organized Jewish community were trying to do Shabbatons with people at SJP to do rapprochement, to try to get to understand each other. But we need to understand the mind of our enemies. Our enemies understand us. They speak our languages. They know our political culture. Mamdani is the product. He's the second generation of Muslim Brotherhood influence in the United States. He went to the best universities. He is a highly educated, smart man of conviction. His convictions are to destroy the state of Israel because he comes out of the Muslim Brotherhood ideology. And for Jewish organizations to engage them is really a profound mistake. We need to understand the mind of our enemies and know where they're coming from. We need to speak their languages, understand their ideology, understand their religious, strategic views, their political views. And then once we understand them, we can come up with strategies to deal with them. So I think understanding the source of the problem is so important. And when we understand the source, we can develop strategies to combat the anti-Semitism.
You mentioned at different conferences that it doesn't start with Jews.
Right.
How can you relay that message to Americans who might be hearing you now?
So what Professor Elie Wiesel always taught us is that anti-Semitism may begin with the Jewish people, but it never ends with the Jewish people. And history shows that once Jews are attacked, it's not only an assault on the Jewish people, it's an assault on human decency, and it's an assault on democratic principles and practice and democratic institutions. The fact that Mamdani wants to destroy the state of Israel. The fact that Jewish people in New York City, in the United States of America, in 2025 are discussing whether they should stay or whether they should go is outrageous. It's outrageous that anti-Semitism has reached this level in the great democracy of the United States. And yes, this is a problem for the Jewish community. It's a profound problem. But the fact that an important part of the citizenship of this country is terrified of its future is a challenge to American society. The United States of America, its political leaders, its intellectual leaders, its communal leaders have to come together and address this problem because we know from history, if it's left unchecked, other sectors of our society are going to be attacked and displaced as well. This is so profoundly anti-American that we need to take a stand.
I feel that Americans have lost so much sight of the privilege that it is to live in a democracy. Yeah. I've studied at my university. I went to an international school with people from Venezuela, with people from these countries that were riddled by corruption and socialism. And Americans are lost on these ideas. And I think a lot of it is tied to privilege, but a lot of it is tied to just disinformation.
Yeah. I'll say something to the effect that, so I'm Jewish. I'm proud to be Jewish. I'm Jewish because my mother is Jewish. I was born into this, whether I liked it or not. And maybe there's metaphysical reasons for it, but I was born into it. I didn't have much of a choice. To live in a democracy, to be a citizen of a democracy, every generation has a choice. And every generation has to safeguard and protect and reinvigorate and perhaps expand our democratic principles. Our democracy is being challenged today, profoundly challenged. Young people are developing anti-democratic values and ideas. Young people from our best universities are defending and promoting an ideology that is not only genocidal in its anti-Semitism, it doesn't only want to destroy the state of Israel and the Jewish people's self-determination, it supports an ideology that subjugates women and murders gay people and wants to destroy democracy. The fact that these young people are coming out of our best universities is extraordinary. And this is a profound challenge to our democracy. Yes, I think Americans and people living in other democratic countries really need to understand what it is to live in a democracy, and we need to protect it. Generations before us, 80 years ago, 90 years ago, Americans and Canadians and Australians and British people and French people in huge numbers sacrificed their lives to save democracy. We're very lucky. If it wasn't for them, God knows where we would be. And I think in this generation, we really need to take stock of where we're at and where we're heading and really dig in deep and protect our democracy, because it's no longer a foreign threat. It's not a threat far away. It's a threat in the United States, in New York City, at the best universities in this country, in the halls of power, in Congress, in the Senate. There's people being bought off by the Muslim Brotherhood. In our media of record, Qatar and other entities are investing heavily into the best newspapers and television stations and social media platforms. And this is a threat. And unfortunately, the Jewish people are the early warning system of something that's profoundly flawed. And I think we need to regenerate our efforts to protect democracy and expand it. People on the center right, people from the center left really need to come together and protect our democratic principles.
Amazing. Thank you so much, Charles. Thank you
Thank
for
you.
your time.
Thank you for all you guys are doing.